He doesn't scream, he doesn't collapse, he doesn't even ask for help, he just becomes quieter, more functional, less alive. Not because he wants to die, but because living as a stranger to himself became unbearable. Carl Jung once said, "A man doesn't die from addiction, he dies from starvation of the self." And most men today are starving, not for food, not for sex, not for success, but for meaning. This video isn't about motivation, it's about disintegration. The quiet ruin that happens when a man trades his truth for acceptance, when he calls obedience discipline and calls his slow collapse maturity. Modern men aren't weak, they're just spiritually exiled, trained to perform, programmed to serve, but never taught to exist. So they become addicts, workaholics, emotional vaults, and we call it strength until it kills them, not loudly, not violently, but with silence, guilt, and roles that no longer fit. If this resonates, you're not broken. You're just tired of the performance, and maybe, just maybe, ready to remember the man beneath the mask. He learned early, emotions make you weak. So he wore silence like armor, not out of strength, but survival. He didn't speak, because no one ever listened, so he became fluent in vanishing. There's a kind of man who never complains, but you can see the weight in his shoulders. He's calm, collected, respected, and dying a little more every time someone calls him disciplined. They think he's solid, but he's just frozen. He doesn't cry, not because he can't, but because crying would prove he still feels something, and feeling something would mean he's still human. But silence turned him into a function, useful, predictable, slowly decomposing behind his roles. You know this man. Maybe you are this man. The one who says, "I'm fine," like a ritual. The one who disappears even when he's in the room. The one whose laughter has no echo, because it never came from the chest, only the mask. What they called stoicism was just learned neglect. A man taught to never need, because need led to disappointment. A man taught to stay useful, because presence alone was never enough. So he shut the door on his inner child and called it maturity. But silence is not peace, it's just the absence of witness. And when no one witnesses your pain long enough, you start thinking it's imaginary, that maybe you deserve it. Every year he gets better at being invisible, not because he wants to disappear, but because being seen without being known hurts more than isolation ever could. So he chooses absence, in plain sight. This is how men die without dying, not by bullet, not by overdose, but by starvation of soul. Silence isn't a virtue, it's just a grave with no name. And he's been burying himself one unspoken sentence at a time. He walks into a room and commands it, not with arrogance, but with pressure, the kind of pressure that hides fractures beneath control. He's the man others admire, right before they see him collapse in private. They say he's solid, a real man, but they don't see the rituals behind that strength, the gym obsession, the rigid schedules, the endless proving. Not for glory, but to keep the chaos from surfacing. Discipline as anesthesia. His body looks like a temple, but inside it's a shelter for a boy still trembling. A boy who learned long ago, if you're not strong, you're forgotten. So he became strong by amputating everything tender. No softness, no mess, no truth. He wears productivity like perfume, but it's covering the rot, the unresolved grief, the buried terror, the rage without a target. And everyone praises him for being high-performing. They never ask what it's costing him. Sometimes he wonders if they'd still respect him if they saw him shaking after sex. If they saw him staring at the ceiling at 3 a.m., wondering why all his victories feel like failure. If they saw the scar where his real name used to be. The truth is, he's exhausted. Not from the work, but from pretending it's enough. They told him, "Be a rock." But no one tells you rocks can't bleed. They just break silently under pressure. Strength without truth is just theater. It looks noble, but it's hollow. And eventually, even the most admired man will crack, not because he's weak, but because he was never allowed to be anything else. He's not asking for pity. He doesn't want applause. He just wants one moment, one breath, where he can let go without everything collapsing. But for that to happen, he'd have to admit he's not okay. He's always doing something, always fixing, building, solving. Because the silence of being still, it threatens to expose a terrifying truth. He doesn't know who he is when he's not performing. They praise his reliability. He's the first to show up, last to rest. But when he stops moving, he feels it. That subtle sense of worthlessness crawling up his spine. He's not addicted to work. He's addicted to not disappearing. He doesn't feel loved. He feels needed. And they're not the same. One holds you. The other uses you. But he's convinced himself it's better to be needed than to risk being nothing at all. So he overcommits, says yes when he's burning, carries the weight so no one sees his cracks. He thinks being the reliable one is noble, but really it's a slow suicide called service. He can't take a break, not because he has no time, but because rest feels like failure. He fears that if he ever stops being useful, they'll realize he was never valuable. The vacations don't help. He brings his mental checklist into the mountains. He answers emails in the ocean. Even sex becomes a performance, just another thing to be good at. Somewhere along the way, he became the hammer instead of the hand. And when tools get dull, they're thrown out. He knows this. He feels it. That silent countdown, usefulness, obsolescence, disappearance. He dreams of freedom, but freedom feels empty because he's never met himself outside of function. He doesn't know how to just be. He only knows how to serve until he's silent again. He says he wants peace, but the moment life gets quiet, he starts picking fights with ghosts, texting the past, overthinking the present, because peace isn't peace to him, it's absence. He grew up with noise, arguments through the walls, tension in the silence. So now, when love is calm, he doesn't trust it. It feels too much like the quiet before disaster. That's why he dates fire, why he gets bored with the woman who doesn't test him. He doesn't crave drama. He craves the familiarity of chaos, because calm never felt like love, only neglect. When she offers softness, he pulls away. Not because he doesn't want it, but because it reminds him of everything he never had. The moment feels foreign, unreachable, unsafe, so he ruins it before it leaves him. He mistakes unpredictability for passion, thinks if love doesn't hurt, it must be fake. So he breaks things, emotionally, sometimes physically. Not to destroy, but to feel something real, something that matches the storm inside. His nervous system is wired for war, so peace feels like starvation. And when everything is finally okay, he self-sabotages, because something inside believes he doesn't deserve ease. It's not that he wants pain, it's that pain is the only thing that makes sense. Joy feels like a trick. Trust feels like a setup. So he clings to suffering, because at least it's honest. He says he wants healing, but when healing comes, it feels like betrayal, like giving up on the only language he ever knew. So he bleeds in love, not because he's broken, but because he doesn't recognize himself without the wound. He didn't fall in love with her. He fell in love with who he thought he was around her. The version of himself that smiled more, spoke freer, felt possible. She wasn't a person. She was a mirror. She made him feel seen, not for what he did, but for what he could become. But here's the brutal truth. He was always trying to impress himself through her reflection. Not love, projection. Every heartbreak felt like an identity crisis, because when she left, she didn't just take the relationship. She took the image of the man he thought he was becoming. And that's what really hurt. He doesn't chase connection. He chases validation wrapped in skin. Because deep down, he's not looking for love. He's looking for proof. Proof that he's enough. Proof that he's real. So he idealizes her, puts her on a pedestal made of loneliness, worships her not for who she is, but for what she reflects, a version of him worth loving. That's why he tolerates disrespect, why he forgives too quickly, why he waits for texts like they're resurrections. He doesn't want her back. He wants back the self-worth she made him feel for 5 minutes. When she smiles, he feels chosen. When she withdraws, he crumbles, because it was never about partnership. It was always about reflection. She was a mirror, and now it's shattered. He doesn't miss her. He misses who he thought he was with her. But no one tells men this. You can fall in love with your own potential and still call it heartbreak when it walks away. He doesn't resist healing because it's hard. He resists it because he believes he doesn't deserve it. Somewhere along the way, guilt replaced identity, and now he wears suffering like a uniform, not out of pride, but penance. He was taught to feel bad for wanting more, to apologize for his needs, to confuse sacrifice with virtue. So when something good finally comes, he backs away, afraid to contaminate it. He mistakes pleasure for danger, kindness for a trap, because guilt trained him to only feel safe when he's in pain. Pain is predictable. Peace feels stolen. His inner voice isn't just critical, it's punitive. It whispers, if you're not suffering, you're selfish. So he builds a life that hurts, then calls it responsibility. No one's punishing him anymore, but he still punishes himself. Stays in relationships that drain him, stays in jobs that erase him, because somewhere he confused loyalty with masochism. He rejects softness, not because he hates it, but because he feels unworthy of it. Every time love approaches, he finds a way to sabotage it, because accepting it would mean forgiving himself. Guilt is emotional blackmail, and his past is still collecting payment. He overgives, overcompensates, over-explains his existence, as if breathing alone demands justification. You can tell when a man carries invisible guilt. He walks like he's trespassing through life, flinches at compliments, doubts every joy. Not because he's broken, but because he hasn't yet made peace with the ghosts who told him he was. Did you enjoy the content and it made a difference for you? Click on Super Thanks and support our work. He wakes up as a provider, works as a function, sleeps as a title. His name? Forgotten. Somewhere beneath the layers. All that's left is who they need him to be. He used to have desires. Now he has responsibilities. He used to write, paint, dream. Now he answers emails and pays bills. They call it maturity, but it feels more like extinction. He tells himself, this is what a man does. But sometimes, in the shower or late at night, he feels the absence of someone he used to know, someone softer, wilder, realer, father, husband, leader, worker, so many masks, none of them breathable. And the scariest part? He's good at all of them. So no one notices he's dying behind them. Ask him who he is and watch the silence stretch. Because if he's not fixing something, carrying something, solving something, he feels useless. Not because he is, but because he forgot how to just be. Retirement terrifies him, not because he loves work, but because when the role ends, so might his sense of self. What's left when the applause fades? Every role he mastered became a prison. Every identity he wore became a muzzle. He doesn't speak from the chest anymore, just from necessity. They don't hear him, they hear the mask. He doesn't need a new job. He needs a resurrection, not the man they respect, but the man he buried to earn it. And until he remembers him, nothing will ever feel whole. He's the helper, the fixer, the strong one. He'll drop everything to save someone else, but won't sit still long enough to hear his own cries. He's convinced it's noble, but really, it's escape. Helping others gives him worth, but also keeps him distracted, because if he ever stopped rescuing, he'd have to face the boy inside still screaming. And that's a rescue mission he avoids at all costs. He doesn't call it avoidance. He calls it loyalty, love, purpose. But he's not healing the world. He's just rearranging the furniture in a burning house because he won't open the basement door. Every addict he comforts, every broken soul he uplifts. It's all a projection. He sees in them what he won't face in himself, so he pours out over and over until he's empty and silently resentful. His kindness is a performance of denial, not fake, but misdirected. He believes if he can fix enough people, he'll eventually be allowed to rest. But no one comes to rescue the rescuer. He says, they need me, as if that's a virtue. But the truth is, he needs to be needed, because without that role, he fears there's nothing underneath. He doesn't want to be selfish, but selflessness became self-erasure. He can name everyone else's pain, but ask him about his own, and he changes the subject. You can't rescue others from drowning when you're the one holding your breath. And he is, every day. He's not the hero, he's just a man avoiding the one person who actually needs saving, himself. He was never suicidal, not in the way people imagine. He didn't want to disappear, he just couldn't keep performing a life that never felt like his. Existence became a role, not a home. Jung was right. Until he made the unconscious conscious, it directed his life like a silent dictator. He called it fate, but it was just unspoken pain with a steering wheel. He wasn't lost, he was unheard, speaking through addictions, through exhaustion, through withdrawal. Every drink, every scroll, every late-night spiral wasn't a cry for attention. It was a ritual of forgetting. Nietzsche warned us, what doesn't kill a man doesn't always make him stronger. Sometimes it just buries him deeper beneath identities that never fit, beneath stories he never chose. This death wasn't dramatic. It was in the slow fade of his voice, in the smile that didn't reach his eyes, in the morning routines that felt like mourning, not living, just repetition. He didn't need to be saved. He needed to be remembered, to touch again the first spark, the one before shame, before silence, before he edited himself to be accepted. Rebirth isn't fireworks. It's the moment you finally sit with your shadow and stop flinching. It's quiet, still, sacred. The resurrection doesn't announce itself. It waits. And when it comes, it feels less like a victory and more like a return. Not to some higher self, but to the real one. The one buried under performance. The one who was never gone, just waiting. He wasn't trying to end it. He just couldn't keep pretending. The roles, the masks, the silence, none of it felt like him anymore. He didn't want death. He wanted reality. Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. And most men are living someone else's fate, a script passed down by fear, guilt, and invisible rules. They don't even know who they were before the performance began. So let me ask you, who are you when no one's watching? What would happen if you stopped proving, stopped rescuing, stopped performing, and just faced the man underneath it all? What if your addictions were never the problem, but a desperate message from the part of you still alive? What if your sadness wasn't weakness, but sacred grief for a self you were never allowed to become? You don't need to burn it all down, but you do need to stop pretending you're fine. Because your silence has turned into a coffin, and it's time to crawl back out. You were never the voice that destroyed you. You were the one who survived it. So now, rebuild, quietly, without applause, but with truth. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and continue this journey of brutal self-knowledge and emotional freedom. If this spoke to you, wait until you realize the addiction was never your enemy, just the last thing that made you feel real. In the next video, we go deeper, not into the habit, but into the hunger that created it.